this is another edition of The Spectre, and this is D.S. Yoxheimer, and I'm going to be discussing the culture of comic book movies in Hollywood, and why. I mean, it's been going on a while. I think it's kind of, it's petering out. That's just my opinion. Maybe it's just with the end of the Avengers Endgame. That's kind of just my feeling about it. And the DC movies just really haven't done that well since, you know, the Dark Knight trilogy. So, I'm basically, yeah, that's kind of where I've been at about it. They do seem to keep coming out, though, and it's not like comic book movies are nothing new. I mean, like the Christopher Reeve Superman trilogy. I mean, that was pretty big up until, like, I guess, Part 3. But there weren't a whole lot of other comic book related movies coming out during the 80s when that was popular. That was it. Superman. And Superman's sort of more like a, you know, like Mickey Mouse. He's an American icon. He's not just something that, you know, is kind of in the just in the comic book world, you know, just something, you know, comic book geeks are aware of. So everyone was aware of Superman. So he was relatively easy to market. When around the time that Tim Burton, or I think it was Tim Burton was the first director that was looking into making Batman in 1989, Warner Brothers and a lot of other studios, before they even got to Warner Brothers, were like, no, we don't, this movie's just not marketable, we're not going to be able to make this film. And studios were obviously wrong. I mean, when Batman came out, it was the biggest thing ever in 1989. There was no other comic book movie, at least no other one like it. There was a couple around that time, but nothing too notable. And it was just like, it was huge. It was Batman. Batman's already had a TV series. He had been around in comics for, you know, since 1939. So he's just, you know, like, he's everybody knows who he is, and plus he's just fucking cool, you know. He's some dude who goes out at night and beats the shit out of criminals dressed as a bat, and he's a, you know, billionaire, and he has all kinds of high-tech, you know, crazy weaponry and everything at his disposal, and he seems to get away with it, you know. Even though he's a vigilante, you know, Commissioner Gordon still works with him, so I'm not quite sure why. But anyway, but with that said, it's like the only thing that came during the 90s, the only films that were really, there were a few. I mean, they did start looking at comic book properties to make films out of, but it was only movies like Dick Tracy and well, The Crow, which was kind of a hit. Pretty, you know, had a cult following, very popular. I think I went to see it twice back then when I was a kid. Very popular with the goths, if you know what I mean. And it garnered a slew of bad sequels. But anyway, it's still, you know, it's on its own. I mean, it's it's part of the, I don't know, I want to say cachet or legend, is that the star Brandon Lee was shot by a malfunctioning blank gun or whatever, and he bled to death, unfortunately. So that's part of the lore of the Crow movies. And they made, before 2000, around 1998, they made the Blade movie. Yeah. So that was sort of the comic book zeitgeist of the 90s. In the 2000s, what happened is Blade was, I guess, relatively a success. They made 2 sequels to it. So, and that's an obscure, I mean, he really never even had his own title comic book character. So what somebody thought it was a good idea to make an X-Men movie, which was actually a pretty cool idea. I mean, they had Patrick Stewart playing Professor X. I mean, we always, you know, me and my friends would always talk about it and think, wow, he would make a really awesome Professor X. And I guess so did some casting directors. So, and the movie was cool. I mean, it wasn't like some perfect, awesome, movie or the best comic book movie ever made, certainly. But the first 2000 uh, X-Men film, on the strength of it, was able to basically open up this whole universe, which that canon is basically still going on, even with the latest X-Men movie, Dark Phoenix, which I haven't seen yet. But it really, they did tie in the original cast with the cast playing younger versions of them, and most of the movies are always entertaining. I always generally like them. I buy mostly DC comics, but I have a lot of Marvel stuff, some Spider-Man, Punisher, various other obscure characters and things like that, and Excalibur, which was like the British X-Men, if anybody's ever heard of it. But beside the point, they made these X-Men was just this really, they were really, the first three were pretty cool. The third one's, tends to get a lot of criticism, but I mean, overall, you look at trilogies, it's certainly not the worst. And they went on to make all the other X-Men sort of, with the younger, the newer class or whatever, I forget what it was called. But the one cool one with Kevin Bacon I liked that I can't remember the name of, because there's so many of them. That's the thing, and there were so many Avengers movies too, which I'll get into later. But I mean, there's just so freaking many of them, but with that, with that said, I mean the X-Men movies definitely did change they changed the whole game, and I think set the bar, or pretty high anyway, for future movies to be made. Now, in this time period, DC releases, I think it's before, well, yeah, I'll just say this, it didn't get released before the Dark Knight trilogy, but it released a relatively, at least obscure to people who are outside of the world of comics, but most people have heard of Watchmen. And Alan Moore, one of the creators of Watchmen, said the movie isn't filmable. You can't make a movie of it because it's just fucking out there and shit. So, anyway, so 2009 rolls around, and, people who somehow get the rights to this movie or whatever, it's Warner Brothers, we're going to make a movie anyway, fuck you. And they did. And it's not that it's a good flick. It's dark. It definitely, it's recognizable at, that it comes from the comic. Is it different? Yeah, there's differences to it. But even the stuff that wasn't in the original theatrical release, they added to the film. There was a comic book a kid in the movies reading called The Black Freighter. They put that into another version of the film, which makes it like another hour longer, if you're interested in watching that version of it. But Watchmen is about a bunch of superheroes. There's two generations of superheroes. One was took place in the 40s, and most of them didn't have powers until Dr. Manhattan came along, which is a character that has he was basically in a lab experiment, was basically all his cells were taken apart, and he somehow reassembled himself into this blue super being that doesn't wear a lot of clothes usually. But yeah, the contraption he died in, the contraption, was called the intrinsic field subtractor. That's what it's called. And Dr. Manhattan's one of my favorite characters. I even have a tattoo of his insignia. That's bad. Yeah, I know. So anyway, yeah, that was big. I'm not going to go into the whole thing about Watchmen, but Watchmen was cool. If you're a comic book geek, I think for the most part, there's good points to find in it. But yeah, there's, for all you insiders, comic books as an inside joke, there's no squid. So, at the end. But it's a trippy, weird movie, and it's nothing like, you'll see in Justice League or in Avengers or anything like that. It doesn't really have the it's more cynical and definitely an interesting movie for a comic book flick. But moving right on. The one thing that's annoyed me is like the freaking Spider-Man movies in the 2000s. I mean, not that I didn't like any of them, of course, but it's just like, what the fuck? I don't like get what they're trying to do. I just don't understand. Like, they've had 3 different Spider-Mans in the 2000s. You know, Tobey Maguire, what was his, James Garfield? I don't know his last name, which were okay movies. And then the new one seems more like, yeah, this is like Spider-Man. He's younger, he does seem like the character more. I will give him that. I mean, it's like, okay, third time's the charm. I mean, I'm not that I didn't like any of the other incarnations. I like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. I like the second one. I think that's my favorite. With Dr. Octopus. But the, you know, and it is. I think it is. Most people agree that that's probably the best of the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, or the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. But they were just so like, it's just, you sort of like, you realize like that one ended when Tobey Maguire's films ended. You know, clearly that was over because they had just totally fucked it. You know, it wasn't. It ended on such a melancholy note and everything, and then like they came out with the other ones with it was with Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, and they were playing you know, Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, which I thought was, I didn't mind them. I thought they were pretty cool. You know, they're not badly shot movies. I think there was a lot of good in them. You know, I guess they were, I mean, yeah, they were corny like any Spider-Man movie, but there was really nothing really wrong with it. And on the third one, or the second one, there was a cliffhanger about a new villain, and then they like kind of just like went to nowhere. Like Paul Giamatti was playing the Rhino, and after Spider-Man came back from, and if you haven't seen this movie now, like really, why are you watching this? Gwen Stacy had died, so he wasn't, you know, he wasn't really on duty as Spider-Man for a while, and he decided he wasn't gonna, you know, do this shit anymore, and then he comes back. In any case, and then they just end it, and that's it. You know, you know what I mean? They just basically fire him, and they reboot the whole thing for the Avengers, because I guess if they were going to include them, what happened is basically Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man. That's why you don't see him in those other movies, or you haven't. Because Disney owns Marvel, as far as I know, right as of right now. So they couldn't get the rights to Spider-Man for a while, and so that's kind of what happened is they got the rights. This is what I'm assuming happened, because it's the only thing that kind of makes sense, is once Marvel or Disney, or Marvel Studios, owned by Disney, gets the rights to Spider-Man, they have to recreate their whole other Spider-Man, recast him, and just basically make a reboot of the character. They just didn't take like, okay, we'll just take Andrew Garfield. We'll take what you made, and then we'll, you know, just incorporate it into our movie. And it probably would have looked a little awkward, maybe, I don't know. Because Andrew Garfield's more of a guy in his 20s, and anyway, usually Peter Parker is a teenager. So now on to the dovetailing that into the Avengers, to bring this to a conclusion, is I saw Avengers Endgame. It was one of the 2 movies I saw this year so far. I saw Pet Sematary in that one. And I did want to see it, because I wanted to see how it ends, obviously. And it was it was a cool flick. I mean, it definitely was. It was depressing because everybody was missing for a while, and there's surprisingly, Paul Rudd is part of the, or most of the solution for saving the day. Basically, he essentially, or at least from the science end of it. Of course, Tony does figure all this out. Iron Man, because Tony Stark is just awesome. He can't let him invent something or solve something without Tony getting in there and getting a little credit. So I think that's what that was about. But it's a hard movie to just talk about, having seen it once, because it's so long, and I really don't. I mean, you've probably heard what the end is and everything by now, but the movie is long and it's dark, and I paid attention to it the whole time. I didn't really want to miss anything, of course, but it was. I just it's hard to really take in all those movies, because I think there's 22 movies, and then okay, this, and what characters who weren't there. I was trying to think of why is so and so not there? That doesn't make much sense. And why were the Fantastic Four never in this movie? I mean, I know they've made some bad Fantastic Four movies and they're a little cheesy, but they are in that universe, and they're in the Avengers universe too in the comics. So not that they're part of the Avengers, but I think it's I mean, not that it was, of course, already crowded with characters. The things I don't know if I liked a lot was just Thor becoming a drunk, and all of that shit. I thought that was pretty stupid. So I wasn't too. I mean, it wasn't funny to a point, and it was just what are Thor's powers? Because he seems to get fucked up too a lot. I mean, he can drink a lot and get a beer gut, and he lost his eye, and they gave him a face. So I don't how invulnerable is Thor? I mean, he gets the shit beat out of him on the battlefield and seems to recoup very quickly, but I don't understand what his power, other than his hammer gives him his power, of course, but I'm not sure. And yeah, it is such a silly. I mean, you think about the movie, the Avengers, the whole trilogy and everything with the Infinity Stones. I mean, it's pretty silly. These 6 stones are basically what balance the universe, and Thanos gets a hold of them and just basically wipes out half of all living beings throughout the world. So, or the universe. So it's pretty fucked up. But yeah, it's outside of that. I mean, I don't really know what the future of comic book movies are. I mean, it's certainly been the zeitgeist in the 90s, and it's in television and everything, pretty heavily. There still seems to be comic book shops open selling comic books, which is just a very antiquated print medium at this point. But so I don't really know. The characters are basically, I mean, they're you just have a main protagonist trying to save everybody, so who doesn't like that? Most people like it, or they like a conflicted hero, bad deeds, good person, I don't know. So, or somebody like Spawn, or, The Crow, or something like that, I guess. And that's going back in the archives. The television comic book verse, which is mostly DC, there's only Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that's about it that I can think of. And then there's the CW shows like Arrow and Flash and Supergirl, and I watched Arrow and Supergirl because it's not Arrow. I watched the Flash and Supergirl because they can go back and forth, and they have a time portal that can they can just basically travel through time and space or whatever, and That's pretty crazy. That comes in handy, you know. But basically, on that show, Supergirl exists in the same world that Superman exists, and Batman, and well, there's Batwoman now, and she has a new show. And the Flash exists in the world that's Arrow exists, and I'm not sure who else because they didn't really. I don't think they were budgeted for a lot of other superheroes. Um, but that's basically the premise. You know, that's the universe on television. There, you know, that expansive universe, and of course they have the Legends of Tomorrow, who travel around in a like some sort of time ship, interdimensional time ship. But that's just crazy. So I don't know. I mean, there's always going to be fantasy genre and everything in television and in movies and media and video games and all of that and literature. So it's not like it's. Um, but I don't know how the trend is going to go at the box office. Like, how long is this going to be viable, or people are going to get sick of it? Because kids can get into some other cool, crazy thing, you know, like Jackass or those sorts of movies, or I don't know, people just movies of people doing like extreme stunts, you know, in IMAX or whatever. Because that would be exciting, because you know then they could die, you know. In superhero movies, you know, almost nobody ever dies. But so anyway, I think I've said enough on that. This is DS Yoxheimer. If you like my videos, subscribe, click the bell if you want to, you know, if I want to be notified of any new videos. I hope your summer is going well, and go see what is it called? Dark Phoenix, the new X-Men movie. Why not? I'll probably go see it so I can talk about it maybe at some point. Right now I'm a little talked out as far as comic book movies go. So I'll leave you on that.